Certainly. Here is another detailed account of a real-life ghost story, The Haunting of the Enfield Poltergeist in London. Location: 284 Green Street, Enfield, London, England. Time period: August 1977 to September 1978. Key figures: the Hodgson family, particularly Janet Hodgson, and investigators Maurice Grosse and Guy Lyon Playfair. Peggy Hodgson was a single mother living in a council house in Enfield, North London, with her 4 children, Margaret, age 14, Janet, age 11, Johnny, age 10, and Billy, age 7. The Hodgson family was of modest means, and their home was an ordinary semi-detached house in a working-class neighborhood. Peggy had recently separated from her husband, leaving her to raise the children on her own. The Hodgsons' home at 284 Green Street was a typical British council house, built in the 1920s. The house was not known for any prior paranormal activity, and the family had lived there peacefully for some years before the strange events began. August 30, 1977, the haunting began on the night of August 30, 1977, when Peggy Hodgson heard strange noises coming from her daughter's bedroom. She rushed upstairs to find Margaret and Janet frightened and claiming that their beds were shaking. The children also reported hearing knocking sounds on the walls. Peggy dismissed their fears, thinking it was just their imagination, but the disturbances continued. The next night, more bizarre events unfolded. The children reported seeing a chest of drawers moving by itself across the room. Peggy witnessed the furniture moving again and attempted to push it back, but it seemed to be moving against an invisible force. The chest moved away from the wall as if being pushed by an unseen hand. Over the next few days, the knocking sounds grew louder and more frequent. They seemed to follow the family members from room to room. The sounds were accompanied by cold drafts and an eerie sense of being watched. The family began to hear disembodied voices, often speaking in a deep, gravelly tone. The voices would taunt the family, using crude language and making threatening remarks. The activity in the house escalated quickly. Objects would fly across rooms, often hitting family members. Lego bricks and marbles were thrown by an unseen force with such speed that they would leave burns and bruises on impact. Chairs would tip over, and cupboards would open and close on their own. Bed sheets were ripped off, and toys would be flung around the house as if by an invisible hand. On September 4, 1977, after enduring several nights of disturbances, Peggy Hodgson called the police. When the officers arrived, they initially thought it was a domestic disturbance or a prank. However, while they were investigating, they too witnessed paranormal activity. A chair moved across the floor by itself in front of one officer, who later signed a written statement confirming what he had seen. The police, however, could not assist further as they believed it was not a police matter. A few days after the police visit, paranormal investigator Maurice Grosse of the Society for Psychical Research, SPR, arrived at the Hodgson home. Grosse was particularly interested in poltergeist phenomena and had personal reasons for his involvement, having recently lost his daughter in a tragic accident. Grosse began his investigation by interviewing the family and setting up recording equipment to capture evidence of the disturbances. Not long after Grosse, another SPR member, Guy Lyon Playfair, joined the investigation. Playfair was an experienced researcher with a background in documenting paranormal phenomena in South America. Together, Grosse and Playfair would spend over a year investigating the events at 284 Green Street, documenting the case extensively. One of the most dramatic events reported during the haunting was the alleged levitation of Janet Hodgson. On several occasions, Janet claimed to have been lifted into the air by an invisible force. Neighbors also reported seeing Janet floating above her bed through the window. Photographs taken by Grosse and Playfair showed Janet being thrown from her bed, although skeptics argue that these could have been staged. Multiple witnesses, including journalists, neighbors, and even skeptics, reported seeing Janet levitate or being thrown across the room by an unseen force. Janet herself claimed that she would sometimes be transported across the room or even through walls, although these more extreme claims were met with skepticism. One of the most unsettling aspects of the Enfield poltergeist case was the deep, gravelly voice that emanated from Janet. The voice claimed to be that of Bill Wilkins, a former resident of the house who had died there years earlier. Janet, speaking in the voice, would describe how he had died of a hemorrhage while sitting in his chair in the living room. The voice was recorded and analyzed by various experts, who were astonished by the fact that Janet could maintain the gruff voice for extended periods without straining her vocal cords. However, skeptics suggested that Janet might have been using a vocal technique known as ventriloquism, which she vehemently denied. The story about Bill Wilkins was later corroborated when his son confirmed that his father had indeed died in the manner described by the voice. Gross and Playfair recorded hundreds of hours of audio during their investigation, capturing everything from the eerie knocking sounds to the voice of Bill Wilkins. They also took numerous photographs, some of which showed objects moving or Janet being thrown from her bed. These recordings and photos remain some of the most compelling evidence in support of the haunting. The investigators also documented instances of spontaneous combustion, in which small fires would break out without any apparent source of ignition. Objects would appear and disappear, sometimes reappearing in different parts of the house. Despite the extensive documentation, skeptics argue that much of the evidence could have been fabricated or exaggerated by the children, particularly Janet. The haunting took a severe psychological toll on the Hodgson family, particularly Janet, who was at the center of the activity. She missed significant amounts of school and was often in a state of fear and anxiety. The constant media attention and skepticism also weighed heavily on the family, who struggled to convince others that they were not fabricating the events. Although the most intense period of the haunting lasted from 1977 to 1978, the Hodgson family reported that minor disturbances continued for several years after the investigators left. These included occasional knocking sounds and objects moving on their own, although the activity eventually subsided. Many skeptics believe that the Enfield poltergeist was an elaborate hoax perpetrated by the Hodgson children, particularly Janet. They argue that the physical evidence could have been faked and that the voices and levitations were tricks performed by the children to gain attention. Janet herself later admitted that some of the activity was exaggerated, but insisted that the majority of the events were real. Some researchers suggest that the events could be explained by psychological factors, such as mass hysteria or the influence of suggestion. The Hodgson family was under significant stress due to their financial situation and Peggy's recent separation from her husband. The intense media coverage and involvement of paranormal investigators may have exacerbated these factors, leading to a self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts. Despite the skepticism, many believe that the Enfield poltergeist was a genuine case of paranormal activity. The sheer volume of evidence, including eyewitness testimonies, recordings, and photographs, makes it one of the most well-documented hauntings in history. Supporters argue that the complexity and persistence of the phenomena go beyond what could be easily faked by children. The voice of Bill Wilkins and the corroboration of his story have led some to believe that the haunting was caused by his restless spirit. The idea that a spirit could attach itself to a location and cause disturbances is a common theme in paranormal literature. The Enfield case is often cited as a prime example of a spirit trying to communicate with the living. The Enfield poltergeist case received extensive media coverage in the UK and internationally. Newspapers, radio shows, and television programs reported on the haunting, often sensationalizing the events. The case became a topic of public fascination, with many people visiting the house in the hopes of witnessing the phenomena for themselves. The story of the Enfield poltergeist has been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and television shows. The most notable account is Guy Lyon Playfair's book, This House is Haunted, The True Story of a Poltergeist, which provides a detailed account of the investigation. The case has also been featured in various paranormal documentaries and was the inspiration for the 2016 film, The Conjuring 2. The Enfield case is considered one of the most significant poltergeist cases in paranormal research. It has been studied extensively by both believers and skeptics, contributing to the broader understanding of poltergeist phenomena. The case has been used as a benchmark for evaluating other reported hauntings and continues to be a reference point in the field of parapsychology. The case remains highly controversial, with ongoing debates between those who believe in its authenticity and those who see it as a hoax. The Enfield poltergeist has become a symbol of the broader debate over the existence of paranormal phenomena, and it continues to provoke discussion and investigation to this day. The Enfield poltergeist is one of the most famous and well-documented hauntings in modern history. Whether one believes it to be a genuine case of paranormal activity or an elaborate hoax, there is no denying its impact on popular culture and the study of the unexplained. The events that took place at 284 Green Street remain a fascinating and mysterious chapter in the annals of paranormal research.